Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. I'm Lisa Jones, your host, and today I have Suzanne Giesemann with me. Suzanne is a messenger of hope and the founder and teacher of the Awakened Way, a path to knowing who you are and why you're here. A former U.S. Navy commander who served as a commanding officer and aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is today providing stunning evidence of the existence of universal consciousness and our interconnectedness. Suzanne's gift of evidential mediumship has been tested and proven. Her work has been recognized as highly credible by noted afterlife researchers and organizations. Suzanne is the author of 12 books and an inspirational way shower. She has been a keynote presenter for many organizations and has presented at well-known spiritual centers, including Omega Institute, Lilydale Assembly, and Unity Village. Suzanne brings messages of hope, healing, and love that go straight to the heart and illuminate the light of self-awareness within. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Lisa. What fun to be here.
Oh, I am so excited to have you here. You and I have met. We met in South Carolina when we were attending a Helping Parents Heal event. And right. I just was so taken with your story of how you woke up to your gifts. And I would love for you to share that with my listeners.
Okay. Well, I can understand that some of them right now might be saying, did she say she was a Navy commander and now she's a medium? It was a very unexpected path for me. My husband married a naval officer. He did not marry a medium. He didn't even know what a medium was when I started to become one. It's just crazy. I'm not one of those people who saw spirits when I was a child and turned it off and turned it back on again. I didn't know I had any more psychic or intuitive abilities than anybody else. And now it is just blasted wide open.
Oh my gosh. And I just have to say, I love that about you, because me being a former CPA, working for Pricewaterhouse and Ernst & Young, and the same kind of thing. As a child, I didn't see, I guess now I'm putting pieces together and I can kind of vaguely remember, like seeing Indians or something outside my window. But again, as a child, I just thought that was,
See, I didn't even have that.
Oh, wow.
But
okay, cool.
I did have an interest in these people called mediums. And so there was something that drew me to read about them and to know what they were and to go to have a past life regression. That kind of thing was always intriguing to me, but I never thought I would be doing it. And unfortunately, in my case, my abilities were awakened as the result of the worst tragedy I could imagine. And that was the unexpected death of my stepdaughter, Susan. I don't have biological children, but my husband has 2 daughters. And the youngest, Susan, was a sergeant in the Marines, and she was crossing the flight line at her air station, and the storm was a good 10 miles away, but this bolt of lightning came out of the blue and struck her. And the doctors worked on her for about 7 hours, but they couldn't save her or the baby she was carrying. So we lost Susan and our grandchild, our only grandchild, at one time. And that led me asking for answers. Why do some people die so young, and why are some people in the wrong place at the wrong time, or so it seems. What I've learned now since, as a result of my journey that started with Susan's passing, is everything really is in order, and there's great purpose and meaning to things when we turn them into something that helps our souls grow. And that's what I've done with Susan's passing. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but it was all because of her that I went down this path, discovered I can connect to the spirit world. Let's back up. Discovered there is a spirit world, first of all.
Exactly.
It was my desire to know if Susan had survived that lightning strike, if her soul really existed. I'd heard about this thing called the soul. And I set about to find her. So I visited mediums. I did what so many parents who have a child across the veil do. They start reading, they go to mediums and start meditating. And all of that just opened this up for me to the point where it's become my vocation. My husband might say my obsession, because I spend every free moment working to help other people know that there is a greater reality, and we are part of it because we're all souls right now, not just when we pass.
Wow, that is amazing. And so I guess I am curious, was there any specific thing that almost like turned on the switch for you, or was it just kind of a gradual awakening?
I can't answer that yes or no. There was a specific moment when I knew I had the ability, but the switch, once you are aware there's a spirit world, anybody can turn that switch if they have created the proper environment within the energetic field to flip that switch. And I didn't realize that the daily meditative practice that I started, training my brain to be somewhat still, to be focused, in hopes of connecting with Susan myself, was the training ground for connecting with spirit. Because it was 2 years after her passing when I was writing the biography of another medium. I wasn't a medium yet, but of medium Janet Nohavik. I was sitting in the back of her classroom. She was teaching her students how to become mediums, but I was just there to learn about her and write her story. When she called me to the front of the room and said, "You can do this too." She sensed it in my aura. And she said, "There's a spirit standing here. What do you sense?" Now, until that moment, I had never even tried except to connect with our Susan. And I don't know that I had even had experiences with Susan to that point. But I trusted Janet that if she said there was a spirit standing there, then there must be. And I produced very accurate evidence, verifiable facts about the father of one of the students in the class that left my head reeling. How did I do that? Where did that come from? So in that moment, I flipped that switch, simply based on the belief that somebody was there and that Janet wouldn't tell me that if there weren't. And then just trying. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So I love that, because I think it was almost the belief from your teacher in you gave you that opportunity, or the like, oh, okay, well then what am I sensing? And you were, open enough to just go into it. Where I think a lot of people, they're closed and they're not, they're too almost, they either one, don't have the belief in themselves, and two, are just afraid of like what they might see. So have you had any experiences that scared you or that kept you?
None at all, but I'm going to get back to that in a second, Lisa, if
Yes.
I could, but I'm hearing that it's very important to let everybody who's watching know that when I say I brought through evidence about this woman's father, I'm talking, I sensed he died when he was 70. He died of cancer. He was an engineer. He had a full head of white hair, and his wife called him Twinkle Toes. That's pretty astounding stuff for someone who's never done this before. So I was blown away personally, and it just started from that moment. But as for scary stuff, nothing. And I know that 2 years of daily practice of sitting in the silence to connect to something greater than myself showed me that we all are souls and arise from a benevolent source of love. We are the light that everybody speaks about. And so I just learned to turn up this light within so brightly that I suppose without the fear doesn't come a knocking,
I can totally relate to that, because I feel the same way. I've never felt negative energy or dark energy. And people always ask me that question, like, well, aren't you afraid of this? And I'm like, well, no, because I just, like you said, the more light I turn on, the more it's just, there's nowhere for darkness to enter. It's kind of how I've always thought of it. I haven't really.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Oh my goodness. Well, you had an interesting story that you shared when I'd met you about being in 9/11. And
right.
Now, was that before or after? And then you can share the story.
This was well before I became a medium. This was when I was on active duty in the Navy. So there was a big divide there. I retired from the Navy, and it was, let's see, about 6 years after I retired that I discovered this ability to connect across the veil. So you can imagine some of my former colleagues, she's a what?
Right.
A medium. And, yeah, but 9/11 was really the catalyst. It was really when I started asking the big questions. Is this life all there is? But I didn't get satisfactory answers at the time. I needed Susan's passing to really pushed me in that direction. But on 9/11, I was the aide to the head of the US military, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, like you said in the biography there. And we were in the air on our way to Europe. My general was going to be knighted by Queen Elizabeth later that week. I mean, how exciting. I was going to be right there with the Queen as she knighted him. And we never got to do that because we got word 3 hours out over the Atlantic about the attacks on our country. And he said to me, "Commander, take us back to Washington." So I went up to the cockpit and said to the pilots, "We're going back." And by that point, every other aircraft in US airspace had been grounded. Even the president's. People think he was the last person in the air. I'm pretty sure we were, other than the fighter jets that escorted us and were patrolling the skies. So they escorted us, but our flight path took us right over Manhattan. So I have pictures that we took from the air looking down on this billowing smoke coming up. And then we flew right on to Washington, back to our office building, the Pentagon, which we had just left that morning. And going through the deserted streets of Washington and seeing the billowing smoke coming out of our building was very sobering, but not so sobering as going into the building and getting a briefing from the terrorism expert, and then walking around to see the damage, stepping over jet engine pieces in the grass and looking at that gaping hole where colleagues had been hours earlier. So life-changing stuff. At that time in my life, I couldn't handle other people's grief. I just wanted to run away from it. And that's why I retired as soon as I was able to. It took me 2 years because I had only served 18 years on 9/11. But the day I had 20 years in the Navy, I retired, and my husband and I took off sailing in our sailboat. We sold our house and cars, and off we went to live our dreams, because 9/11 showed me life can be pretty short sometimes. And there was another Navy commander who was 2 weeks away from retirement on 9/11. And I thought, all right, we're going to live that dream. But that's why I say that we did go off and do that sailing, but I hadn't learned the major life lessons I came here to learn. At that point, I had no idea there was a greater reality. I didn't know what the soul really was. And now I know we are that.
Wow.
And it's all a result of Susan's passing. 9/11, the starter, but I didn't go far enough with my seeking. And then Susan passed, and I had to know, is death the end? And I can guarantee everybody listening, absolutely not. The body may die, but consciousness, the soul, the spirit that breathes us is eternal, as is love. There's no doubt. I could talk, I don't know how many hours, 48 hours? I could fill all of it with stories of the evidence from the other side.
Oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. And so I guess I'm curious, so it takes me to, what are the spirits doing on the other side once they're there, and and then what do you have to say about that?
It's a very simple answer. Whatever they want to. Yeah, and it all depends on how awakened we are when we pass, what we experience when we cross to the other side. I have a dear friend, Brenda Baker, who passed this past May. She had a full awakening before she passed. What do I mean by that? She completely understood that we are souls here and that we are eternal. So she cleared out all of the human ego stuff. She was still very human and funny and earthy, but she loved everyone, and she learned to love herself. And that's why we're here, Lisa. That is why we're here, to shine the light of the soul, for the soul's evolution, always adding something more beautiful to what has been created before. It's not that the soul has to evolve. We come from perfection, but it's let's just keep creating. And Brenda got that. So she crossed them within a day of her passing. She is talking to me clear as day, zipping around, visiting all our friends. That's what she was doing on the other side. But those who think there's nothing there or don't believe in an afterlife, like my wonderful mom, she passed 3 months ago, and I haven't heard from her, with her initiating it yet. My friend Brenda took me to see my mom days after she passed. Amazing, stunning visit with evidence, but my mom thought she was dreaming. She thought she was still in like a coma state in which she passed. So what are we doing on the other side? We're continuing awakening to the fact that we are love. And if we're still very much attached to our human stories, why, we're going to play golf or ride bicycles or do very human things.
Interesting. And so then it also, I recently heard somebody say that when they had a kind of a near-death experience, it was, they just felt like they were in the void and just alone and nothing there. And so they're still frightened now about the next step. But I was thinking, is that because of their beliefs about the, right here?
That's very, very likely. I don't know if you had a chance to ask them, but that's generally what happens. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're kind of creating, whatever, what your thoughts are, what you're creating now, what you're going to experience.
Yeah. I want to back that up with
yes.
what I'm saying with some evidence. When I say is you're riding a bicycle on the other side, that comes directly from a reading that I did. A woman's son had passed to the other side, and he came through in a reading, and she asked me, after lots of evidence to validate, this is your son. He told me how he passed, his passions in life, mentioned certain people in the family, all kinds of good evidence. She asked me, what is he doing on the other side? So I asked him, and I said, well, this seems crazy, but he says he's riding a bicycle. Well, the evidence, the evidential part of that is that his dad, still here in human form, took his bicycle, painted it with designs in honor of his son, put his son's name on it, and now rides that bike for charity. And he had told his wife, every time he rides the bike, he feels like Joseph is riding with him. And he comes through. I never heard that story. And I said, what are you doing on the other side? I'm riding my bicycle. Talk about validation.
Wow. That's just beautiful. That's amazing. So what, is there another couple stories? I'd love to hear a couple more that just are.
Well, just another one to validate what they're doing on the other side was a really great one. I had a woman sitting here in my study with me face to face, and she asked what her husband's doing on the other side. So I asked him, and I laughed. I said, he says, I'm standing firmly on 2 feet and I'm playing golf every day. And again, to me, the former Navy commander, that sounds ridiculous. Why would you do that in heaven? Well, why not? Because it turns out golf was his absolute passion, but he couldn't play right before he passed because he had one of his legs amputated. And what did he say? I'm standing firmly on 2 feet, playing golf every day.
Wow.
Oh, man. Good stuff, huh?
Well, it's almost like, you're this detective and, you're the in-between, right? I guess that's why it's called a medium, because you're literally in between the two worlds and sharing this amazing confirmation for people.
Well, it's funny because one of my books is called Wolf's Message. And in his reading, he popped in on me before the reading and gave me all kinds of information about him. Beautiful thing to do, because nobody can say, well, you were reading his parents' mind or reading their body language. No, he dropped in on me in bed and I'm just writing down what he told me about himself. But only 73% of that was accurate. We had it scored at the University of Arizona by Professor Schwartz and by this young man, Wolf's parents. I wasn't happy with 73%. If my readings aren't in the 90 percentile, then I need to go back to school, But it turns out that he deliberately withheld some of the things that appeared to be misses, unfolded, revealed to be actual hits in the months following that visit, revealing a message for all of us that is mostly what I teach in this awakened way that you mentioned, about how to live our lives with more purpose and meaning while we're here, aware and conscious of who we are and what we are. And it's funny because the author Carolyn Mace, big thought leader, said that Wolf's Message is a mastery of intrigue. It is like a spiritual detective story. And I didn't have to do anything. These things just came to light in a beautiful way, thanks to the one big web that we're all a part of.
That's beautiful. I love that. I had a similar situation where I brought through a high school friend for one of my clients, and she said, well, I didn't know him that well. And he said, he was saying to her, well, I just want you to know that I'm doing well. And, I'm still with all my friends that I was in high school with. And so she left my place. And so it was kind of like, she wasn't sure, like, was it because he was killed in, I said he was killed in a motorcycle accident. It was, during your high school years. So I had some specific, but it wasn't, didn't have a lot more than that because, again, she didn't know him that well.
Yes.
Well, then later, so she left my place and she went into town. And not only did she run into one of his best friends, but then she went to another store and ran into his other best friend, who she had not seen in either one of them since high school graduation.
Oh, that's great.
And and she was so dumbfounded, she couldn't even, say, like, I just want you to know, I just had a reading. But I think for her, it helped validate everything else that came out of that reading. So you just never know. Things do happen after the fact. And that's why sometimes, for me as a medium, when I don't get like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense to me, it somehow unfolds later, that
I just did one of those readings this week, and the woman she says, well, I'm not sure. But with experience, I've learned to really know this is definitely coming from the spirit. You'll figure it out, or it'll come to light. And she wrote me the next day and said, oh my gosh, look at this and look at that. And not just stretching something to make it fit, very solid details that she either forgot or wasn't aware of. Beautiful.
Wow, that's so amazing. And I think too, that goes to, I think as well, when you're with a client, sometimes it's so much, right? I mean, the veil is open and it's almost like bombarding them with this information. So it's hard or difficult for them to take it in or to remember. I mean, you're almost in an altered state, I think.
I think people have to be, because how else do you explain in that reading, for example, I heard her son clearly talk about Dustin. Now that's an unusual name. And I thought, wow, you're giving me a name, because that's great. And she didn't know who that was. He mentioned it 3 times, Dustin. There must be something to this. And she said, no. And afterwards she emailed me and said, it was his best friend. But then I put the onus on me as the medium. I should have been able to discern that from him. So We're all, we're all working and doing our best to
That's right. I love that.
As you know, if people only understood how subtle this communication can be.
Right.
Some of it's like they hit you over the head with it, or you see this image and there's no mistaking it. But some things are just fleeting and wispy. And it's like, did I hear that? And you say it and it's a wow.
Right. Well, I'd love to. Yeah. So how do you get the information? I mean, is it a knowing, a hearing? You just explained a couple of them, but I'd love to know more about your experience.
I'm grateful that it comes in every way that the spirit world can communicate. So I hear the thoughts, I'll hear songs with lyrics, I'll see images, and I sense physical sensations in my own body that match their symptoms when they passed. Really evidential.
Oh, I've had that experience too.
I smell certain smells, and then you just know. So all of it combined, however that person in the spirit world can best communicate, they're going to use that.
Wow, that's
fun. It's a dance with the spirit. Just they're saying this, but then anything they say, I try to back it up with that feeling, with that knowing. You try to combine the different ways they communicate with you to make the accuracy higher. It's all important to me to be as accurate as possible.
I love that. Well, it's like you're an artist of putting those pieces all together and creating that experience for the person that you're reading for. And it's just beautiful.
It's fascinating to me, because the more you do this, the more you learn how that you can dig deeper and look farther. One of my favorite examples was sitting with a couple whose their daughter had passed. And I said, she's showing me a picture of her with the president. Now we could just leave it at that, but I've learned you can look, they're right here telling you, look deeper. And I said, who, which president? Silently. I said, she's now showing me it was President Clinton. And now I'm asking her silently, where is it? So that I'm not reading her parents' mind. They don't know what I'm asking her. She took me in the front door of her house. I said out loud, this picture of your daughter with President Clinton, if I go in the front door of your house, I turn left, to the left is a study, and it's up on the wall in there. And it was. I mean, I never lose the awe at what they can show us. And this woman said that moment right there changed the whole trajectory of her husband's healing from his daughter's death. And that's what this is all about. For us here, it's about the healing and the knowing that our loved ones aren't gone forever. For those on the other side, it's them saying, now they know I'm still right here.
Oh, I love that. My whole body is filled with chills. I think that's probably one of the most beautiful gifts that you can give anybody, is that, knowing that their loved one is okay and they're still with them. And wow.
This is why I am obsessed with this work, because when Susan died, it was the worst possible tragedy, and no counselor could help me. They didn't understand. And then we went to a medium, and she showed us that Susan was still here. It changed my life. And that's what I want to do for other people. That's why it's so important to me. Not only to know that our loved ones are still with us, but we take that farther now. For me, the mission has just expanded. You see my Navy terminology, right? The mission. It is my mission to let people know that death is not the end. That's part one. But the awakened way is, how do we live our life now that we know that we don't just become souls when we pass? That's huge, just knowing that. But how do we live our life consciously now as souls here and now, while we just love the heck out of everybody? That's why we're here. And what a way to live. It's transformative. I'm so peaceful and overflowing with love these days that it's, you wake up every morning and say, oh boy, here we go.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, so can you give some ideas of how can people live their lives, more fully awakened here? Because I know it's funny, because there's people, like with the material world, it's like, there's all sorts of people that, money and they just get, bogged down in it all.
Yes. Let me tell you, when I retired from the Navy for a while, I after we sailed a few years and Susan passed, I needed to do some work. So I led strategic planning sessions, and it was all about planning for success and goal setting and long range planning. And now I live every day being guided in the moment. It doesn't mean we don't plan for the future, but it's not, I have to do this and this and this. You can get to the point by knowing who you are, I'm a soul, and knowing that we're not alone, that every moment you can simply just shift your focus to the greater aspect of all of us that's connected to the big picture, and be guided moment by moment. Is this the right decision? Is this the best choice for me? It's like having your own genie in a bottle. I'm not talking about guides who are separate from us. We do have those. I'm talking about connecting with this part of us that is connected with this one big web. It's like constantly being connected to the internet, only without a computer. Guidance, it's an internal guidance system. We all have that because we're souls. So you said, how do people live this way daily? Well, it requires some kind of daily practice of acknowledging there's more than this world, and acknowledging that we are more than this human body. To get to the point where you know that, not some medium tells you that, requires perhaps sitting in the silence 5-10 minutes a day and asking questions like, am I wasting my time here? Is there something else? Who am I? I did that for 2 years. Every day I became more intuitive. Every day I became more peaceful. I couldn't stop after 2 years. It's my number one priority today to spend. This morning was 7 minutes. I'm not some person that sits for an hour. I don't have time for that, and none of us do. Maybe a few people do, but we have busy lives. We're here to live our lives. But if you can carve out just this much time to sit quietly and take your focus off of this human life, you will discover, if that's your intention, what lies beyond this human life, and it will transform your world.
Wow. Beautiful. And it's so true. I absolutely sitting and just being grateful. And my prescription is always follow your joy. What is the next joyful thing I can do in this moment? And I always talk about breadcrumbs, just something suddenly is like a little twinkling breadcrumb. I'm like, oh, let me go see what that is, and it just, you never know where it's going to lead you. It's a beautiful existence when you can get to that point of not needing to know what's going to happen, but be open to seeing what unfolds.
Exactly. And the awakened way that I speak of is based on 3 principles. And this is all at theawakenedway.org, these 3 principles. But number 1 is recognizing that you are a beautiful soul here and now. Number 2 is we are part of one big web, recognizing that and starting to see the connections, not just amongst us here in the physical world, but across the veil. But number 3 is exactly what you were just talking about there, that we find our way home with a capital H, our true nature, through the heart. And by you expressing gratitude, that brings your heart into alignment, your human side into alignment with the soul, with the greater side of all of us, the side that never dies. And so gratitude is a perfect tool, just in an instant. When my mom, I'm blabbing on and on here, I hope you don't mind.
Oh, no, this is amazing.
But when my mother passed, it was one of the few times in the last 10 years where I felt truly deep grief, and of course I did, but that was just the day she passed. And I didn't like that feeling at all, because it's so foreign to me now to feel that way. You really can live a life filled with happiness and joy, but that doesn't mean you smile when your dear mother passes. But we don't have to remain stuck in grief. So when I was in the throes of that, I can't stand this, it was one of those I went off the planet moments, you know. Gratitude brought me right back to center. I just realized there is always something to be thankful for, and I focused on that. And just by making a list in my mind of the things that I still had to be grateful for, it just brought me right back into alignment with the soul.
Wow.
So there's a simple tool for anybody in any moment.
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that's one of the things that people struggle so deeply with, grief. And when I lost my mother, I mean, same thing, but I got stuck in it for a long time, because she was really, I was adopted as a child. And so it was almost like she was my, you know, she saved me. And now that she's not here on this, you know, earth, even though I can communicate it with her, even though I know she's still there, it was just that missing, that humanness, that connection. So I know.
Well, that's the beauty of the awakened way. Number 1, you're realizing you're a beautiful soul who walks in 2 worlds at once. We get a choice. Do we stay stuck in this story of the human role we're playing, or do we shift our awareness to soul's perspective? And any of us can learn to do that at any moment. So when I was bogged down in the story, oh, my mother died, I don't like how this feels. When you know in your heart and from experience that you are not only this person playing a role, but you are this beautiful soul connected to all that is, you can literally shift the spotlight to that role and look down on all of it with perspective and peace. It's life-saving.
It is. It absolutely is. And that's ultimately what I did do, is when I finally was able to, you know, bring myself out of that grief and look down and just figure, what do I want to do in this lifetime? You know, I want to move to Maui. So that's what I did.
Good.
And I know you're going to be joining us here in Maui later this month to come speak at our IANS conference.
I can't wait.
Yes. So we're going to get the word out and share, you know, with everybody to come and see you. But before we get there, how about if I do a little reading for you?
Wouldn't that be fun?
Okay. Let's see what Spirit has to say. So I always pull 3 cards, and these are soul coaching cards, which I've been using for years, and they're just so fun. So let's see. It's coming through so strong. So the first card is the blockage card, and it's surrender. And I mean, we were chatting just a little bit before we got started, but I know you've been working nonstop, and it's time to surrender. It's time to take a break, which leads you, you know, coming here to Maui. So
yay.
And and then the action card is leadership, which you are such a leader. I mean, the fact that you're willing to get tested and have your information validated, and, you know, it's just such an amazing role. And I think what Spirit's saying is that your training through your whole life led you to this very moment, right? I mean, your naval training.
There's no doubt, but it also lends so much credibility to the mediumship work, whereas people might dismiss other people and just right offhand, without knowing anything about them, say, that's crazy stuff. But they look at the pictures of me in uniform and with the general, with the chairman, and with the president, and they say, maybe not so flaky.
That's right. Well, and that's what's so beautiful is that you've given mediumship a new face, so to say, you know, that you're credible and that you're, you know, that you're the scientific brain and the leader, and it's wonderful. And your outcome card, which I just love, is enthusiasm, which there's nothing more than you have is enthusiasm for this, as you've said. And
well, I have to tell you, because my name's Suzanne. My parents called me Susie, both till the day they died. And they always used to call what you're experiencing with me here my enthusiasm.
Well, there you go. You can't make it up that was your outcome card. So your enthusiasm is exactly right. And wow.
Thank you.
Yes. And you had mentioned your website. And so I know you've got a few free things on there. Do you want to talk about anything that the listeners might go
there
to?
are so many gifts on the site, plenty of videos to just show you what is real and get lots of evidence. I have free meditations under resources. So some really great exercises for clearing out the gunk, the blockages, clearing a chakra clearing exercise called the 10-minute transformation. But I think the best resource on my site is the Daily Way with Suzanne and Sanaya. That's a daily messages that I get from my team, Sanaya. I have thousands of them on the website and many long sessions of channeling Sanaya's guidance. And it's beautiful wisdom that speaks to the heart and that touch on so many topics that we deal with in our normal human lives. So people can access that directly at dailyway.org, or it's right there on the website.
Wonderful. Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you think, you know, your guides want my listeners to know about, or?
Yeah, that everybody is put in our path for a reason, everybody. And no matter who is staring you in the face in this moment, they're there for a reason. We're here for a reason, and it's to shine our light, the light of love. So whoever's in your face, shine brightly upon them. Just turn up your light, and you could change their life, but I guarantee it will change your life if you make that a habit.
Wow.
That has nothing to do with your topic of dealing with death and eternal life, but it has everything to do with it, because if you live your life that way, when you cross, you will be fully awakened.
Absolutely. That is beautiful. And as you said it, you know, my heart just burst open as you were talking, as you mentioned, your words go straight to the heart, and that's what makes you so beautiful. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing this with me and everyone listening right now.
Thanks, Lisa. And thanks everybody for listening. I hope to see all of you and meet you in person sometime.
Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.